Hi there. This video is for entertainment purposes only. Thank you for visiting my channel once again. And if you're new, welcome. Please do not forget to press the subscribe button, give a thumbs up for like, leave a comment, and please do share. Now, this is the fourth video in a series of videos that I am doing on the Playbook of Supremacist ideology and practices. It's a rather long playbook, and I think I have about 2 more to do on it. Now, before we begin our discussion, let me introduce myself. My name is Winifred Davis. I like to read, even about myself, so that I don't forget anything. I have been a shaman, psychic medium, traditional and spiritual counselor and healer for the past 37 years, going on 38 in another couple of months. September of this year, September 21st of this year. Now, I am also an author, an essayist, poet, and a former spoken word movement performer. I subscribe to no religion, and when I say that, I mean I subscribe to no religion. I believe in universal justice and truth. The imposter justice of man has an exception to every rule, but with universal justice, there are no exceptions to its rules. And the truth has no my side or your side. It stands unopposed. Now, I'm not here to lead anyone. I don't want to be a leader of anything. And I'm not here to convert anyone. And I don't want anyone to lead me. My duty is to my conscience. And that is the light that guides the free will I was given at creation. That's what makes me responsible and accountable for all my actions. I can't blame anyone. Each of us was given a conscience to guide the free will. We were given that creation, at the time of creation. That's what makes each of us, as I said, responsible and accountable for our own actions. We can't blame our general, our king country, parents, the bully, or demon or devil for that matter. Each of us is responsible for our own actions. And once again, I'm not here to convert or to lead anyone, because each man must evolve according to his own light. Now, my duty here, or what I chose to do and what I've been called to do, is to be a vessel, a messenger, to deliver messages from the collective, comprised of members of the higher hierarchies, including the archangels and my many guides. And when I say that, each of us has the ability to connect with the archangels as well, with the members of the higher hierarchies. So I'm not special, and none of us who do what I do is special. It is what we choose to do. And in some cases, when we go on what I call Neptunian journey, that is our contract with humanity, with the universe, we are called, we are chosen to go, not because we are special, but because we have had the experience. We've been through the journeys that are required at that particular moment and for that particular job, if you want to put it that way. We answer the job description. Let's put it that way. Okay, so we have the qualifications for that particular job, and each of us has qualifications for different things. Okay, now I get those messages and it's the truth. Consequently, sometimes the truth hurts. It might be an offense, but it's not a sin. And sometimes it's hard to face the truth because the truth can be brutal. And when we look in that mirror of self-reflection, I travel with one every day. Sometimes when the truth stares us in the face, the true reflection is not a pretty one. I know, believe me, I know. But we have to face it. We have to face the truth if we're going to move up, ascend that ladder of soul restoration, and bring equilibrium to our soul. That's why each of us is here, and none of us, none, is perfect. Now, as I said, I'm not here to convert or lead anyone. Each man must evolve according to his own light. Now, I've been on a lot, and when I say a lot, I mean an awful lot of karmic journeys throughout my many lifetimes, arduous ones, including this one, because I've incurred karmic debt, awful karmic debt in some of those lifetimes. But I decided long ago I'm going to do the work and start that climb up that ladder. I'm not at the top. Maybe I'm in the middle, I don't know. But I'm determined and I'm getting there step by step. And so I've walked a mile in many shoes, many different shoes, as I said, in many of those lifetimes where I've known great power, awesome power, and others where, I've been a hobo and I've had no power. But I've learned. And so on in this lifetime as well. I've walked a mile in many a shoe. And so when I sit here, I speak with moral clarity. And I will not put me mouth a ground for talk. Left me make me talk, as my grandmother Ella would say. I'm not going to face plant when I have to speak the truth to anyone. And so when my guides give me messages as harsh and as brutal as they are, I will deliver the messages, some getty, some selly. Only in that way can we aspire. Know what is wrong, what we are doing that is incorrect, and correct those actions. And sometimes we try, but we fail. Well, try again. Cut ourselves some slack and try again, right? We'll get there. It's not a matter of if, but one of when. Each of us, no matter how low on the rung, on the ladder of soul restoration we are. Even Hitler, for example, will eventually reach the top of that ladder. Now, please do not freely interpret what I say. Say exactly what I say. If I say the sky is blue, I didn't say sky blue. I didn't say marine blue, even though it's the sky. I didn't say sky blue. I didn't say marine blue. I didn't say navy blue or turquoise blue. I said blue. That means all shades of blue. And if I say tiny fishes swimming in a small aquarium, I mean a tiny fish is swimming in a small aquarium. Please do not freely interpret, and then you interpret to someone else and they add to your interpretation, and by the time it gets to the 10th person, that tiny fish has become a big whale. And a whale is not even a fish, it's a mammal swimming in a vast ocean, which is not a small aquarium. And when I call out injustice and folly that we commit, any of us, whether it be my Jamaican brothers, I'm Jamaican, my Afrocentric brothers, my Zionist brothers, be they Christians or Jews, my white brothers, my North African brothers, my Arab brothers, whomever. I'm not picking on anyone because none of us is perfect. I will give you the facts. It's just to exhort us, all of us, to do better. Now, at times I will discuss at length current events as I see fit, because they're very relevant to the truth that is reincarnation and its facts. That's what this channel is about. That's why I founded this channel. It's not to make predictions. I'll give messages and they play out. The record speaks for itself, and so many. But this channel is not a channel to predict anything or to read anyone. It's about reincarnation. And as I said, I will speak of current events because they relate to the facts, the many facts, right, of the truth that is reincarnation and knowledge. If you cannot apply knowledge, it serves no purpose. So I apply that knowledge. That's part of my Neptunian contract. Applying that knowledge and showing you that knowledge and how to apply it to make life better is what this channel is about. This is a cup runneth over period of very few greater transitions. Feels like Armageddon, apocalypse, revelations, end times, but it's not. The world will go on. It's just that it's a period where there's so much karmic debt that has been incurred, and the climate and everything and everyone is affected. There are always end times and revelations going on a smaller scale in different places, but this particular period, every single person, everything on earth is affected. But things will settle down and the cycle will begin again. And then I don't know how many thousands of years or tens of thousands of years the cycle will repeat itself until such time. Now, when I receive visions and messages, I will share them with you. And please see some of my books listed below for in-depth discussion on reincarnation and its very many facts, and we're all testament to that. Now, please do not forget that there is no peace in Gaza, and the genocide and ethnic cleansing continues on a daily or a minute-by-minute basis. They're still making unalive the children and the babies. There's still the starvation, lack of shelter, all the privation you can think of. My God. My God. And now Lebanon. More than 1 million people displaced. Over 4,000 made unalive. The destruction, the ethnic cleansing, the displacement. Moving into Syria, deeper and deeper. And Iran, the great Persia. They're not finished with it yet, but unintended consequences. I gave some of those in the last video. Don't forget Sudan, more than 15 million people in famine, and now the RSF that genocide, paramilitary, Israel's in there too, making havoc, helping them along, and they say the UAE as well, and others. They've surrounded, I can't remember the name, is it Obeid or some city, so you know what's going to go on there. Don't forget the DRC, don't forget the children in Yemen. Don't forget any child everywhere on this earth, whether they're the children of perpetrators like Israel or victims of, when I say victims, I mean children of the victims of the wars that the perpetrators perpetrate. Don't forget any child, because every child deserves to be safe from harm. They have a right to shelter, food, education, to be loved, and they have a right to be able to play. And as I said, that includes the children in Israel who have to run from rocket fire. Each child, every child on this earth belongs to all of us. We must remember that. And unfortunately, they have to be subjected to what they shouldn't have to be subjected to because of adults and their forever wars in their quest for power. Now, as I said, this video is for entertainment purposes only. Now, in the last video, we looked at Zionism straight from the horse's mouth. In other words, I took the words of the founders and leaders of Israel from going back to the late 1800s and had them explain, as I said, in their own words, their aims, their goals, how they were going to execute their plans to create Israel. And as I said, they explained it better than any one of us. So then when we have to listen to the gaslighting and the propaganda and the lies, you know, Israel is a democracy, the only functioning democracy in the Middle East, and all this nonsense that we've been subjected to for decades, and the smoke that has been billowed by the Western media, especially in America and even the BBC in England, and thank God Starmer is gone. Not that whoever is coming in might be any better, but we should have known, they should have known in England who Starmer was. All bought out. They're all Zionists, bought out by compromat, money. And well, we know what's that with America's. Ariel Sharon said, as I said in my other video, they don't fear America because they own America, and he is not. They own the American politicians. So he said, never mind when they're talking about, you know, they'll tell Israel what to do. They can't, because they own the American politicians. So, as I said, all of this Zionism and the execution and their plans, which are still being implemented now, and that's been implemented from generation to generation, all of this is reflected and reflects, it tells us that Israel is a state of terror, founded on, by, and with terror, with the aim of ethnic cleansing, enslavement, subjugation, and genocide of the Palestinian people and with the future aim, that's now what's continuing, to do that, repeat that all over the entirety, in the entirety of the Muslim world, in Western Asia, East Africa, North Africa, that includes Turkey, every Muslim state, and those Muslim, and that includes the Christians in those states as well, because they're anti-Christian as well. We see that playing out in Lebanon and in the West Bank. It's not hiding anymore, because they feel that they have it all and they can have so much control over the United States of America. They can do whatever they want. And we must not forget that the Christians in Western Asia and Middle East, if you want to say that, in the Levant, are the oldest Christians in the world, and also along the east coast of Africa there into Ethiopia. We must not forget that. And the Middle East, Western Asia, whatever name we want to say, are not just made up of Muslim and Arabs. They're made up of fast, and they're not all brown. They're made up of Afro-Turks, Afro-Iraqis, made up of Yazidis, Christians, Muslims, Zoroastrians, brown, black, and in between, mixed race, made up of Circassians, Turks, Levantine Assyrians, and I could go on, of course, Persians. I could go on forever and never stop. Now, Israel is the poster child, as I keep saying, of supremacist ideology and practices. And as they put it in their own words, women and children are the greatest danger, so they have to target and get rid of them, because children go on. Men, they're limited. You get rid of them, that's the end of that. But children are the future. They go on. So that's why they're target. They say that in their own words. See my video 34. Now, there are almost no moderates in Israel. Or moderate is relative, right? An extremist is relative. Or by what we understand to be moderate in the state of Israel, there are none really. Their version of moderate is a Benny Gantz or Yoav Gallant, who ordered the starvation of babies and their president who said everybody in Gaza is guilty. That included babies. It is not me saying it. They said it, as I said before, out of the horse's mouth. And they enact it. They not only say, but they also enact every day. And the polls also show it, that more than 80% of the population agrees with the atrocities being committed in their name. Each of us is responsible for the well-being of his soul, because we have a conscience, and if we choose to hide it in the rose bush, as Kirby did, the spokesman for the Pentagon in the Biden administration, he hid his conscience in the rose bush. Doesn't matter if we try to hide that conscience, it's going to find us. We're still responsible for our action. The buck stops with us, not with anybody else. And we can't say we've been brainwashed and we don't know. And moreover, in Israel, that whole area is small. We can't say we don't know what's going on. Daily bombings, like 15 to 30 minutes drive from where we are, going on the beach, sitting in our cafes while babies are starving. 15 to 30 minutes away. We can't say that. We can't pretend. We can't bury our heads in the sand and pretend as if we didn't know. And we remember October 7th, but it still doesn't excuse us to do what they're doing. What your government, if you're Israeli Zionist, is doing in Gaza or in Lebanon doesn't excuse. That's no excuse. When we agree to dispossess people of their property, even if we call them subhuman, that's stealing. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor, nor covet thy neighbor's house, nor his wife. That's stealing. That's theft. Truly, Israel is a society morally bankrupt society. One filled with enabling souls that over the decades have attracted even more miscreant souls. However, unconditional forgiveness, unconditional love will help to make the change. Changes are coming sooner than we think. Changes are coming sooner than we think. We can only go so far in the abyss, and then we gotta move up from out of it. So changes are coming. My guide showed me that, and I've discussed that in many videos. Different changes and how we behave, how we act will determine how that change that is coming, that none of us can stop. As I said, Israel will become part of one state. How they become that part of a one state will depend on their actions from the date in February going forward. Now we're going to talk about Jews and historical events of persecution. And let us not confound Judaism and Jews with Zionists, as I explained in the last video, but with Zionist Jews and Israelis. They're Jews who are Zionists and who live in the state of Israel, but they do not represent all Jews. They're one section of Jews. So now we're going to talk about Jews and historical events of persecution. The Jewish people are an ethno-religious group that have suffered persecution from ancient times, including in ancient Greece and Rome. It is believed that Jews were present in England as early as the days of Roman Britannia. William the Conqueror invited a group of Jewish merchants from Rouen in Normandy to accompany him when he went to the British Isles in 1066 CE to help him consolidate his position as king, because they were the only ones from whom he could borrow the large amounts of cash he needed to consolidate his position as King of England. It was considered a sin for Christians to loan money with interest. That's called usury. So whatever jobs, occupations, positions that nobody wanted was given to the Jews. That's why they were associated with money, because Christians couldn't loan money with interest. Now, in the late 12th century, England, in Stamford, York, Lincoln, and Norwich, there were riots against Jews believed to have been incited in part by members of the nobility to avoid paying their loans to Jewish merchants. You can check my book, Thoughts on the Past, as well as, I believe, Another World Through the Eyes of the Soul, where I go into details with regards to this. Now, in 1190, in what is known as the Clifford Tower Massacre, besieged by rioters, which included crusaders, this was the time of the Crusades, nobles, clergy, troops, and common folk or peasants, Jewish families, approximately 150 Jews, taking refuge in Clifford Tower in York, decided to die by their own hands, become unalive by their own hands, and set fire to the tower rather than die at the hands of the mob or being forced to convert. A few accepted that false offer that, if you convert, you won't be made unalive. They came out of the tower, and consequently, they were made unalive. After that massacre at the tower, the mob proceeded to York Minster, where all the records of monies owed to Jewish lenders were kept. They promptly burnt all of them. Now, accusations of Jews murdering children, Christian children, known as blood libel, was purportedly orchestrated by Theobald V, Count of Blois, and his wife Alix, who she was the half-sister of Richard the First, Richard the Lionheart. So she was a daughter that his mother had with Eleanor of Aquitaine, from her first marriage with the King of France. That's a fascinating story. So she was one of the daughters from that union before Eleanor of Aquitaine was granted a divorce and married Henry II of England and also of Normandy. Now, his half-sister, along with Theobald, as I said, the Count of Blois, was angry at having to pay the taxes to fund the Crusades, and heightened. That's the Third Crusade, right? On which Richard the Lionheart and Saladin were rivals. So this heightened the anti-Semitism, right? Because of those taxes for the Crusades, resulting from Crusade fever that seemed to sanctify the unaliving of Jews, and the rumor that King Richard I, the Lionheart, had ordered a massacre of the Jews, which was not true. All these things helped to foment the riots. So the story, I won't go into that story now, actually. I don't think I go into the story here about the blood libel and what actually one of the friends actually of Theobald, what he did. She was Jewish actually, and I don't think did I go into it here? No, I didn't. But you can check my book for that. Now, before leaving, as I said, Richard the Lionheart had not done so. He didn't give anything like that. Although they were Jewish, Jews were invited to his coronation, and they were not supposed to go there, and they went with gifts, and of course they threw them out and burnt or threw away the gifts that they had brought. Now, before leaving England shortly thereafter, Richard the Lionheart had ordered that the Jews should be left in peace. But of course, he wasn't there to ensure that, because he was obsessed with the Crusades, that his orders were being followed. Now, the xenophobic riots, massacres, including in 1266, culminated in 1290 with the expulsion of all Jews in England. King Edward I, having learnt from the nobility of the 12th century, experiencing a cash crunch, remember now what I said about back in Stamford and Lincoln and York, the nobility, when they have a cash crunch, well, what do? Get rid of the Jews and confiscate their possessions. So King Edward I in 1290, he learned from that, and he had a cash crunch. These kings were always going broke. He saw an opportunity to refill his coffers. So he ordered the expulsion of all Jews, decreeing that they were only to leave with whatever they could carry in their hands, excluding money. All their possessions and properties were then turned over to Edward I, and Jews would not officially return to England for 376 years, until the time of Oliver Cromwell. One of the few positive things that I can think about Oliver Cromwell. Now, there were Jews that did come, and I'll get to that, in that time, before Oliver Cromwell, but they were conversos. They were Jews from Spain, but they say they converted to Christianity. Of course, some of them had not. Now, King Philip IV of France, he was from 1268 to 1314, would also do as Edward I and expel approximately 100,000 Jews from France to seize their possessions, hoping to increase his coffers. When that was not enough, he would turn to the Knights Templar, to whom he was indebted to boost the coffers. That did not help him either, because the lands owned by the Knights Templar was given to the Hospitallers or Hospitallers. Philip could not confiscate those lands. Now, with the Alhambra Decree, it's in Spain, of 1492, the Jews and the rest of the Moors in Spain, the Muslims, were expelled, made unalive, or had to convert to Christianity. Those who really converted were called conversos, as I just said. Those who pretended to convert but still practiced Judaism, and there were a lot of them in secret, were called crypto Jews. Think of cryptocurrency. Oh, the name, right? And we have crypto mask, as I discussed in a past video. Some of the Jews who had converted to Catholicism in Spain and Portugal during the 14th and 15th centuries made their way to England, as I just said, during the Tudor period. They could return because of their conversion. One of them was Rodrigo Lopez, physician-in-chief not only to Elizabeth I, but also to other powerful people, including Francis Walsingham, father-in-law of his would-be accuser, Robert Devereux. Francis Walsingham, his daughter, had the same name spelled with an E, was the spy, master spy who kept England and Elizabeth safe. He was like a Puritan, very smart man. Now, Robert Devereux, the second Earl of Essex, accused this doctor of being a spy. Wrongly accused by the Earl of conspiring with Spanish officials to poison the Queen, Dr. Lopez was tortured, tried for treason, convicted, hanged, drawn, and quartered at Tyburn in 1594. Some maintain that Robert Devereux, the Earl of Essex, and we'll meet him in an upcoming book that I'm doing, had accused Dr. Lopez because he felt that Dr. Lopez had revealed the fact that he had treated the Earl for syphilis. Although Elizabeth I was very fond of Dr. Lopez and doubted the accusations against him, Dr. Lopez still met that horrible fate. Elizabeth, it is believed, was none too pleased with the Earl. The Earl would himself be accused of treason for acts he committed that in reality were not acts intended to harm the Queen. He, unlike Dr. Lopez, was allowed the luxury, if you want to call it that, of execution by the axe of an executioner because he was of the noble class. He was of the nobility. Robert Devereux, 2nd Earl of Essex, who was executed on February 25th, 1601, was the last one to be beheaded within the walls of the Tower of London. He was laid to rest beside Anne Boleyn, the second wife of Henry VIII and mother of Elizabeth I. Anne Boleyn was the great aunt to the Earl, and she was beheaded, of course, by Henry VIII. Now, we will add this history teaches us moment before continuing with the discussion on the persecution of Jews. And this is a lesson, one of the facts of the truth that is reincarnation. What the Earl had done to Dr. Lopez would be visited upon him in the same lifetime, which is, so a man soweth, so shall you reap. He lived by the sword, if you want to put it that way, with Dr. Lopez, and now he also was made unalive by the sword. History teaches us that so a man soweth, so shall you reap, both in the temporal and in the spiritual sense. And remember now, karma is not revenge, but sometimes it plays out like that. You live by the sword, you die by the sword, right? In Jamaica, the saying is, same knife with stick sheep, stick goat. The same knife that sticks a sheep will also stick a goat. So, when you stick a sheep, it means when you're doing, when you're going to make them unalive, right? And skin them. Now, this does not always appear to be true. For many tyrants and others who have inflicted so much suffering on countless others, many have died peacefully in their beds, surrounded by loving family members, a luxury not afforded to many of their many victims, like we take Stalin. However, this lesson that history teaches is true because of because if it does not happen in the current lifetime, it will undoubtedly happen in a subsequent one, because to the eyes of the soul, none of us can escape karma, the law of cause and effect. That is a universal law, and there are no exceptions to its rules. Each one of us must expiate incorrect deeds at some point in one of our many karmic journeys. In the case of the entity, the soul that was Robert Devereux, second Earl of Essex, that lesson was learned in the same lifetime. And believe me, that Earl, that soul, that entity has learned that lesson. That entity has reincarnated now in this lifetime. And as I said, in an upcoming book, I will touch upon that as well. Now, many were made unalive and others expelled from Spain during the Inquisition, and later under a new ruler from Portugal. When the Alhambra decree went into effect in Portugal, the king at the time didn't really give into that, actually, and that's why some of the Jews were able to, the Sephardic Jews were able to go to the Portuguese holdings in the New World without fearing for persecution. But that changed under the king who would succeed that one. So many ended up in the Americas, including Jamaica, with one of the oldest, some say the oldest Jewish cemetery in the Americas, established in 1672 with the interment of Abraham Gabbay. Now, Gabbay means collector of taxes, alms, and keeper of the synagogues and public institutions. That's my family member. My great-great-grandmother was Gabbay. A member of the Sephardi family that has perhaps the largest group of descendants in Jamaica, exhibiting all phenotypes. So, they're the whitest of white, the blackest of black, all textures of hair, eye color, and what have you. And so, like my dad had hazel eyes, right? But his skin color was dark chocolate brown, right? And so his grandmother, well, you wouldn't know if she was white, but her sisters and brothers they looked mixed race and different phenotypes, for example. So, in Jamaica, then a colony of Britain after the Spaniards were ejected, there was still discrimination against Jews. While they had more rights than slaves and did own slaves and land, and they were not allowed to vote, for example. And they have the Gabbay family has a very interesting history with regards to England and why they were gifted with large tracts of land, but we won't get into that now. Now, while they had more rights than slaves and did own slaves, as I said, they were not allowed to vote. Now, many people throughout the Caribbean, Central and South America, have some Sephardic DNA. That's a very common DNA amongst inhabitants in the Americas, Central and South Latin America. Now, Jews have been victims of expulsions, including the Ottoman Empire, many pogroms in Eastern Europe, especially during the Stalin era, victims of massacres down through the ages. Canada, the United States, and Cuba turned back the German liner ship MS St. Louis with 900 Jewish refugees trying to escape the Third Reich. They returned to Germany, and 254 of those passengers died in the Nazi camps. For this shame, Canada apologized in 2018. Jews were prohibited from practicing certain vocations, as Palestinians are. They can't practice certain vocations. Palestinians cannot in Lebanon. They are still now prohibited from practicing vocations, including medicine, law, and engineering. And if that has changed, please feel free to correct me. Jews were allowed to practice vocations that no one in the dominant culture was permitted, as we saw in England with the moneylenders. After World War II, the English placed Britain placed some of the Jews rescued from the concentration camps in what amounted to detention centers on the island of Cyprus. As previously mentioned, Jews are of every color, hair type, and physical traits, often reflecting the physical characteristics of the society in which they have lived for many generations. The fall of empires often give rise to nationalism and creation of states. This was evident after the fall of the Seljuk Muslim Empire in Asia. The death of the Ottoman Empire and its corpse, divided among the colonial European powers, guaranteed the extension of Europe's theaters of wars, anti-Semitic policies, and propaganda of various fascist governments or their proxies in Europe, especially after World War I, into the Middle East and North Africa. Now, during World War II, different types of camps for Jews were established, including concentration camps in North Africa by the Italians and the collaborationist Vichy regime of France. To all of this, and especially the propaganda was added, and lots of propaganda, especially from the Nazis in North Africa, was added. Arab nationalism, which gained steam after World War II. Jews would once again be on the move from homelands in which they had lived for thousands of years, dating back to the 3rd century BCE in Cyrenaica, Libya. We recall that in the 9th century CE, during the Islamic Golden Age, it was from North Africa that the cultural dynamo, who was Zaryab, and we discussed him in the video on Islamic civilization, brought Jewish doctors from North Africa to Cordoba in Al-Andalus. Jews settled in Tunisia in the 2nd century BCE. North Africa had also become the home of many Sephardic Jews who were expelled from the Iberian Peninsula with the Alhambra decree. And Maimonides, brilliant scholar and doctor, Jewish doctor, his family, during a period, of course, when you either had to convert, because usually they were tolerated, Christians and Jews were usually tolerated. I hate that word, tolerant, don't like it, in the different Islamic caliphate. But there would be periods when someone would come along and they'd say, well, you have to convert, if not you have to leave, or if not face becoming unalive. So his family had eventually moved to North Africa, and from there they had moved to Egypt under the not the Abbasid, but the Ayyubid Caliphate of Saladin, and he was actually the court physician. Now, as I said, where am I here? I have to find my spot. Jews had also migrated to North Africa and Egypt during the during a time under the Almohad Caliphate rule in the Iberian Peninsula because of a rise of anti-Semitism and the abolition of the dhimmi, which is state protection for non-Muslims. You paid a certain amount and you were protected during this time, but your status was still below a Muslim. But nonetheless, they left you alone and you were able to practice, rise, right? And be the best that you could be. During this time, Maimonides, as I said, and I ought to just keep reading, and his family left the Iberian Peninsula and traveled first to North Africa and then to Egypt, which was under the rule of Saladin and the Ayyubid dynasty. For the most part, different caliphates were tolerant, as I said, of Christians and Jews. There should be respect, not tolerance. However, there were times such as that just mentioned when usually for political reasons they would become the targets of xenophobia. Now this too was the case in the Songhai Empire. You'll remember the Songhai Empire came after the Mali Empire with the Songhai had with Mansa Musa, the Mali Empire. What they call the richest man in history. Now, this too was the case, as I said, in the Songhai Empire in West Africa during the rule of Askia Muhammad. Now, Muhammad came to power shortly after the Alhambra Decree. The Radhanites, who were Jewish merchants, were medieval Jewish merchants who facilitated trade between the Islamic world and Christendom. They were involved in different trade networks that existed between Central Asia, East Africa, North Africa, the Middle East, parts of China and India and West Africa. And I discussed those trade routes and networks in Thoughts on the Past, Volume 1. They were especially active during the 8th to 10th century. During their travels, they had established communities in different places. Timbuktu was one of these places in which these merchants had settled for centuries before the arrival of Askia Muhammad. For whatever reason, or perhaps he was just simply anti-Semitic, or maybe it was just the fashion of the day, he ordered that they should convert to Islam or face expulsion. Most of them left. Now, the examples of persecution are so numerous that we could go on for days citing them. However, we will cite the final example here of Pope Pius VII. And he was like 1742, 1823. That's his date of birth date, and date of passing. While he advocated, this is Pope Pius VII, for the abolition of slavery, Pius VII reinstituted the Jewish Roman ghetto established in 1555 by Pope Paul IV. And abolished by Napoleon during his brief rule of the Papal State, during which time of the Vatican, in other words, during which time Jews were no longer restricted. At long last, they could enjoy freedom of movement to go and live wherever they chose. Now they were confined to ghettos where the doors and the gates were locked at nights. During the rule of Pope Paul IV, Jews were not allowed out of the ghettos. and the gates' doors were always locked. Jews could not own property. The ghettos were overcrowded, leading to poor hygiene and outbreaks of disease like cholera. Now, that's what's happening in Gaza. All sorts of diseases because of sewage running in the streets. And if you have not enough food and you dehydration, not enough medication, then this is what happens, and that's what's happening in Gaza right now, especially with children and babies. The population declined. Jews had lived in Rome since 161 BCE, before the advent of Jesus the Christ and Christianity, and before the destruction of the temple. With the establishment of Christianity as the state religion of Rome in the 4th century, the religious and political oppression of Jews, supported by religious edicts and laws instituted, and I put there Constantine, he hated Jews, began. This oppression saw the interdiction of marriage between Jews and Christians. So they were not allowed, they were prohibited from marrying. Regulation of services and congregations, and increasing attacks with sometimes the burning of synagogues. We will make one last point before I move on from the persecution of Jews. Some have cast doubt, I just have to say this aside, on the presence of Sephardic Jews in Russia, or descendants without Sephardic names. The different forced displacements of Jews from one country to another should well put that doubt to rest. For example, genealogical records appear to show there were descendants of Sephardic Jews who migrated from Scotland in the 18th century. The original name had also become anglicized and then changed in Jamaica due to mispronunciation, perhaps. Or should we say it became, as so many words and names in Jamaica, it became Jamaicanized because, for example, the late former Prime Minister Edward Seaga, whose grandparents came from Palestine, his name was surely not Seaga. I can't remember what it was, but when they arrived at the port, the person who was at the port mispronounced the name, and so, well, grandparents decided to use that name, so it became Seaga. So it's like you have Baruch, that's a Sephardic name, Jewish name. Well, in Scotland it's Barrows, and then you find the Barrows. So in Barbados, and they came to Jamaica, but that name surely changed from Barrows and it became Barracks. Now, we know barracks, the army barracks, but we don't know of any other barracks. Only from that particular place in Jamaica do they have surnames of barracks. So if your surname is Barracks, you know exactly where your ancestors, at least up onto the 18th, 19th century, where they came from, just in that one little area in Jamaica. Baruch to Barrows to Barracks. I'll cover that in an upcoming book as well. I've got a lot of books to write, believe me. Now, we'll also note another point of interest here, and this is hats off to my youngest son. Hollywood and the entertainment industry and the comic book industry were areas where Jews could work with relative freedom. During what we know as the golden age of comic books, from 1938 to 1956, most of those involved in all aspects of the industry, including artists, writers, publishers, and distributors, were Jews. They had a profound impact on the industry, which began in 1840, and they would transform it into what we now have. DC Comics and Marvel are two companies formed during this golden age. DC Comics creations included Superman, Wonder Woman, Batman, and Justice League. Now, I love my comics. And I'm not too old. Marvel's creations included Human Torch and Captain America. Maxwell Gaines, who pioneered the comic format that we know today. And then you had Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, creators of Superman, are some of the notable names. And then you have Joe Simon. He created Superman, and of course Stan Lee, who began as a writer during the Golden Age and would go on to create other characters like Black Panther, X-Men, the Avengers, and Spider-Man during the Silver Age, which was 1956 to 1970. And the Golden Age was, let me see, what do I have here? The Golden Age, 38 to 56. Now, there were many Italians like art prodigy Frank Frazetta, who started at 16 years old, and Black people like Matt Baker and J. Paul Jackson. Matt Baker created Voodoo and did the black and white art for what is considered one of the first versions, if not the first, of a graphic novel, and it was written by Arnold Drake and Leslie Waller. J. Paul Jackson created Speed Jackson, Jaxon, that's his spelling, imagining Speed Jackson visiting a secret metropolis called Lostona, a premise that bears a resemblance to the Wakanda home of Black Panther. Here. Good. So, that ends that section on Jews and discrimination. Now, I'm going to do one more section here, I believe. Okay. Weaponization of historical victimhood and suffering. Another practice from the playbook of supremacist ideology and practices is the weaponization of historical victimhood, suffering, grudges, and prejudices. Supremacist ideology and practices weaponizes the historicity of the suffering and victimhood of the imprint in which it has inserted itself to commit incorrect deeds and to escape accountability, as previously mentioned. It projects the role of abuser onto its victims and claim unto itself victimhood. Now, we discussed that when we discussed the mask in prior videos. The Nazis used projection, pretending to be the victims of World War I when they were the aggressors, the aggrieved. They weaponized the punitive conditions placed on them as aggressors when they lost to cry victim and become aggressors once more in World War II, and the rest is history. On the other hand, now we're going to go to Israel, has weaponized the genuine historical persecution, victimhood, and suffering of Jews in what has been a masterful job of weaponizing the persecution and suffering that Jews have endured throughout history. The Zionists and the State of Israel have successfully confounded, confused, and conflated Jew with Zionist and Judaism with Zionism to advance their ignoble agenda. Now, I went over that in details in the prior video and videos before. We see the success of this weaponization in America when Congress passes legislation like the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act directing the Department of Education to consider a new definition of anti Semitism, and that to criticize the state of Israel is anti Semitic. That's what this law says. Of course, this was to prevent student protests against the barbarism and morally reprehensible acts that Israel was and is committing against defenseless Palestinians, especially children and babies. Ridiculous indeed. Once again, any American is permitted to criticize America and its government, as it should be according to Constitution, free speech, but not the state of Israel. How ridiculous is that? Israel has been so successful that they have, as is always the case with supremacist ideology and practices, overplayed its hand and has now shown the bright light and exposed their decades old, almost a century, lies for all to see. The mask has come off and the emperor has lost his clothes and is now naked. The gig is up. Media and protest ban will no longer cover the nakedness of the emperor, try as they may, or as the emperor may. The genie is never going back into that bottle. In its onslaught on institutions of higher learning, the current American Manchurian regime, replete, filled with anti-Semites, is also weaponizing anti-Semitism to take away the independence of institutions like Harvard, America's oldest university that is older than the United States of America, in their attempt to convert brilliance into the mediocrity, the ignorance and vile vitriol that they represent and purvey. That is the regime in America, the American Manchurian regime. In this assault on knowledge, we are witnessing a strange bedfellow scenario with anti-Semites, of which most of this white supremacist regime is comprised, and Zionist Jews, many of them also white supremacists. So here you have anti-Semites, white supremacists, some of them Christians, getting together with Zionist Jews, American and Israeli. Many of them are also white supremacists. They're because they believe they're better than brown and black people, usually of Ashkenaz descent. The cravenness of politicians is on full display. Pray they were so vigilant in protecting black people, because many of these same politicians have no qualms in criticizing black people and all Jews behind their backs and using the most vile language to classify them. And by the way, we have people like Cory Booker, who is black, and a lot of black people who are also in the supremacy, in this supremacist ideology and practices vis-a-vis the brown people, the Palestinians, and others. Because remember what we said, suffering does not ennoble, and we veer towards the mask that gives us the most power. So race usually is the biggest elephant in the room, the mask. But sometimes we forget that and we jump over and we get into other masks, we get into other leagues, other strange bedfellow scenarios. Indeed, Israel has weaponized the suffering and victimhood of Jews to commit unimaginable atrocities. including a siege causing starvation even for babies and children, some of whom have already died from starvation, dehydration, and hypothermia, unfolding genocide in the glaring sun of broad daylight with the world as spectators. More than 400, well, now, when this was written, it was 425 days, a whole lot more now, days of multiple daily massacres. They've broken every international and humanitarian law, bombed hospitals, summary executions, used children as human shields and babies, even burning a child, his whole body burnt with cigarette burns. I think the child was 2 years old, and then the other day they kidnapped another one who was under 2 years old, and that baby came back, gave back that baby unalive. My God, the psychopathic and sadistic energies that is running rampant in that terrorist state. My God, my God, my God. They have used children as human shields, raped medical personnel to death with rifles, dogs, and hot iron rods, melted the flesh of children from their bones, bombed mothers trying to find weeds and grass and fodder to feed their children, aid workers, sniped starving civilians as they visit aid trucks, target and snipe children and babies, bulldoze the sick, the dead, babies, mothers, and the disabled over and over again, mixed with rubber, wood, glass, and metal, as if they're making some stew. Made unalive children in a black flag operation, bombed dehydrated children as they waited in line for water, set dogs to bite the elderly children and feed on the dead, dug up cemeteries, locked children, babies, and their mothers, the disabled and the elderly in their homes, and lit them afire, stolen women's underwear, jewelry, and money from the homes they would later blow up, light hospitals afire with patients and hospital personnel in them, decapitate civilians with their hands bound behind their backs, and bury the headless corpse, bury civilians, including children and babies, with their IV while they were alive, as the corpses were found with eyes wide open. Raise orchards and farms with crops, animals, and birds, snipe sheep merely crossing the street, and the list goes on, and that was a long list, a litany. And like the Nazis, the IDF has used Gaza, the world's largest open-air prison, a rubble graveyard for children, and now extermination camp, and the West Bank, the world's largest halfway house, as live showrooms and laboratories, with the inmates who are the Palestinian people as lab rats and guinea pigs to test and to show their new weapons of destruction. AI warfare technology and the latest in tools of subjugation and surveillance that have replaced the branding irons of slavery and the tattoos of the concentration camps. Now, these are not made up stories. You just have to check videos, news reports, and I mean solid news reports, not conspiracy theories, documented evidence, all that I have listed there. You have to check them, and you can know them as they develop. See all my videos and some of my books. I documented them as they went along. the Zionist government of Israel and its armed forces have and are committing these atrocities and more, and have so successfully weaponized the suffering and victimhood of Jews throughout the ages that the great powers have allowed it to continue unabated and without accountability. Now, to the eyes of the soul, there's more to it than that. And I've explained that in other videos through the eyes, but I'm speaking through the temporal lens here. But through the eyes of the soul, there are more explanations for that and why it has to be so. Not even the horrors inflicted on babies has even garnered a dash of empathy or remorse from these great powers in the West. Through the eyes of the soul, we will understand why this is so, as I just said in this instance. Once again, we have explained earlier that this notion of historical grudges, prejudices, suffering, and victimhood should never be, because it is through the eyes of the soul, invalid. It's a fallacy. It doesn't exist. This historical thing, well, it's going on for generations. Through the eyes of the soul, this is rubbish. Just an excuse in our quest for power. We repeat the litany of atrocities committed by the state of Israel and its security forces with the complicity of the West over and over again, so that we never forget. We can forgive, but we must never forget, because if we forget, we will repeat. Because even when we remember, we still repeat, much less when we forget. When we hear the revisionists claim otherwise, and the spinners and weavers spin and weave their tales and webs of lies, we would have seen and heard enough so that they will never succeed in causing us to wonder if what happened really happened. In other words, they cannot tell us that it is sunny and dry when there are torrential rains falling on us, that if we were sugar, we would indeed melt. They cannot tell us to drink that Kool-Aid, because we see it and we feel it. Remember now, we feel that rain falling. And if we were sugar, we would indeed melt from all the rain that's falling. So there's no way you can tell us that it is sunny and dry outside. Now, there are many records of these atrocities, as I said, in different types of media throughout the world. No amount of spin, revisionism, and PR by overpaid influencers or ex-politicians can convince us that it is sunny and dry. And that includes Hillary Clinton, when they try to say, oh, nobody's starving in Gaza. Those are images from Yemen. Really. When we are standing, as I said, in the torrents of rain and getting drenched, that indeed if we were sugar, we would melt. The supremacist playbook always has a do or die moment. So we're moving on now from weaponization, and this is another box to tick off in the playbook of supremacist ideology and practices. The do or die moment. Supremacist ideology and practices always have a do or die moment. Some in the Nazi leadership took their own lives. Mr. Netanyahu, the shrewd, intelligent, he is intelligent and he's shrewd, but I tell you, those compromat and that money is good, because he keeps doing the same nonsense and they keep drinking the same Kool-Aid, because they know, but they can't do any better, I suppose. So Mr. Netanyahu, the shrewd, intelligent, narcissistic, megalomaniac, divisive, and racist hate monger, realizes He realizes, he knows that the gig is up. He's in his ninth life. Cats have 9 lives. There's no more left. His 4 o'clock has come. It's taken a while, but it has come. Miss Thomas Puss, see my poem about Miss Thomas Puss sitting on her high seat of hubris and omnipotency can go no higher. It is about to fall. Yes, Mr. Remember, this video is for entertainment purposes only. Mr. Netanyahu knows his score better than anyone. Despite his bravado, hubris, and bluster, he knows the gig is up and that he really is in his ninth life. His spirit knows. Spiritually, he knows. He knows that time is running out. He is winning until he is not. Remember Noah, when this was written. This is the do or die moment. It seems as if he's winning, but like when death is at hand, and remember this is for entertainment purposes, I'm using a metaphor here, we sometimes shine brighter than ever before our light extinguishes. There really is no difference between the sun of the sunrise and that of the sunset. It's just a matter of what we perceive. Mr. Netanyahu also knows that he's not going down alone. He's going down guns a-blazing, no puns intended. Time is of the essence. He, like a true cult leader, wants to take all his followers, which included the Biden administration, and boy, did he ever, as I had suggested a year before it all happened. Down with him. He did succeed in doing just that, and now, if need be, this current regime as well. In fact, all of America, the whole world, not just its regime, the entire Republic of America is going down with him. That's what's happening now. He has Israel and America. He has locked them in this death spiral. And he's trying with his new additions, getting them into the Pentagon, because he smells the coffee, to wound them up so much that it will be hard to unwind them. The scenario here is to enact total genocide, cause an all-out war in the Middle East, and throw the world upside down, and he couldn't give a rat's passage. What happens? Because he's a narcissist. He's a megalomaniac. He's a sadist and a psychopath. That's what they do. He's well on his way to doing so. But as we maintain this is a providential war, there are many unintended consequences. And remember when I wrote this, we see playing out every single day. Many cults, such as that of cult leader Jim Jones and his People's Temple, as well as David Koresh and his branch, the Dravidian, are examples of this fact. The People's Temple espoused a mixture of religion and political ideology of communism and socialism, with the drawing card to attract the adherents of racial equality. According to Reiterman, these are two authors, and Jacob, Jones used religion to advance his political ideology. This cult would separate itself from America and move to the hinterland of Guyana in 1977, where it could escape scrutiny and create its socialist utopia. On November 18, 1978, Jones's socialist paradise transformed into hell, with mass murder and mass suicide unalive. that took the lives of 918 people, including 276 children, the second largest loss of American lives resulting from a single event. September 11th, 9/11 resulted in the largest loss of American civilian lives. It is worthwhile noting here that although Jones spoke of racial equality, he more or less created the same racial social hierarchy in his utopia as in the American model with mask race. White, college educated women, white women, were at the top of that hierarchy, and the lower tier comprised of the majority of the adherents were black. The branch Davidian, was an offshoot of the Seventh-day Adventist sect that believed that the followers should separate themselves from the world, and according to the former Davidian member David Bund, the world is the sins, the flesh, the desires of the world, and you're supposed to be spiritual. The members set their compound ablaze rather than surrender to law enforcement. Now, supremacist ideology and practices usually overplay its hands. History teaches us that greed overdone will become our undoing. Want all, lose all. So they say in Jamaica. You want everything, you're going to lose everything. With each success in our quest for power, we become even more arrogant. And that arrogance knows no bounds. We feel we are invincible and are the masters of the fate of all other subservient human beings. We are the masters of the universe. We do not realize that we are not at the end of the day. Mr. Netanyahu, for example, he's on a roll, even now, still overplaying his hand. Usually they're the last to know. Supremacists are usually the last to know that they no longer have the power that they had or thought they had. They're the last to get the memo. Mr. Netanyahu is on a roll, as I said, with the explicit complicity and aid of the American Manchurian regime and all the others before, Democrat or Republican, and the approval of the mob. I don't use flock, I use mob. You can use many sheep, is either a flock or a mob. I prefer to use mob. It serves the purpose here, mob, not a nice thing. Mob of sheep that are the UK, the EU, and others. He finally realized his dream of attacking his object of desire, which is Iran. But he got a surprise. That has not dissuaded him as he plans to go on the attack again and add Turkey to his list, for that is an even greater prize. Well, as my guides predicted, now we hear that, but they showed me. Check my videos and the dates, and they showed me how the encirclement that we see going on. Now he will try the same modus operandi, perhaps assassinate the presidents of Turkey and try to destabilize it. Operating from Cyprus and the surrounding area, and perhaps Azerbaijan. Now, my guide saw that. It's going on now, maybe a year and a half, perhaps. Being a NATO country will not deter Israel, because NATO members will not come to Turkey. They'll find some way, some get out of, some loophole They will find an excuse to abscond their obligations, such as blaming Turkey for some false flag operation, which Israel will gladly provide. I mean, it's always the same playbook. It's so tired of Israel and its modus operandi. It's always the same, but nobody seems to care, to notice, or to know. They keep falling for the same old shtick over and over again. Even a 4-year-old can see through all this nonsense and this modus operandi. Now, as I said, the Europeans or NATO, they will find an excuse to abscond their obligations, such as blaming Turkey for some false flag operation, which Israel, of course, will gladly provide. Tipping the scales in Sudan and perhaps further destabilizing Pakistan to further destabilize Iran are also part of the plan. And right now with Pakistan, that's going on from both the South and Israel. And they're using, Afghanistan there to help to effect that along the borders with Iran. Now, Mr. Netanyahu is on a roll, busy punching above his weight and too arrogant to learn now until something does. Then he will have his history teaches us moment, his Waterloo. Mr. Netanyahu and the Israeli Defense Forces and Israel are not doing anything new that they have not done over the past tens of decades. It is a wonder that the world is always so surprised at their words and actions and allow them to get away with them. Were these overplayed, unsurprising words and deeds not causing so much harm and suffering worldwide, and especially for the Palestinian people, it would indeed be a big yawn, eliciting please stop. Your games are so predictable and tiring. Grow up. As I said before a star dims, it shines brighter than ever. Before many of us bid goodbye to a lifetime, we have a glowing before the dulling moment when our loved ones believe that we will stay in this earthly plane a little while longer. When arrogance hits that overplaying its hand moment, it is like these moments. Once again, there is no difference between the sun of the sunrise and the sun of the sunset. The arrogance of supremacist ideology and practices always overplays its hand. History tells us so, as it did with the Nazis. Even the mighty Assyrians in the first part of the Neo-Assyrian period, with its brutality, especially under Ashurnasirpal. Let me get that. I'm getting tongue-tied here. The second, the trampler, as he called himself, of all enemies, overplayed its hand with barbarism and cruelty. The cruelty was so much that the conquered overcame their fear, united and struck back. Surprise, surprise. History teaches us that brute force will only work until those we subjugate overcome their fear and strike back with even greater force. Although some seem to have escaped through the temporal lens, many have not. The fields of the 20th and 21st centuries are littered with supremacists who overplay their hands. Pol Pot, Jean-Claude Duvalier, Nicolae Ceausescu, Slobodan Milosevic, Idi Amin, the Nazis, and Benito Mussolini. They never know when to stop until something stops them. And I'm going to end this here and continue with another video with, for example, giving with one hand and taking back with two. That's part of the supremacist playbook. So now, thank you for visiting my channel. Please do not forget to subscribe, give a thumbs up for like, share, and leave a comment. As usual, I like to end with this. None of us is without blemish, and although I appear harsh, I must deliver the messages as I get them. What I do and the collective, as harsh as we sound, wish that all of us would do better and recognize that we are all brothers. Hate hitching a ride. Hate a contagion, a cancer metastasizing, an opportunistic bacteria, the cloud waiting to block the sun, waiting to hitch a ride on the train of love. Hate, the rat on its rat passage, hitching a ride on the boat to the plague. Hate, the bedbug waiting for our suitcase. Hate, the roach riding on our coattails. Hate, the shadow always lurking behind, sometimes longer than us. Hate, just lurking behind the thin curtain, waiting for its turn on center stage to take us to a place not so far away, a blast back from civilization to barbarism, from knowledge back to ignorance, from wisdom back to impudence. Hate never takes a holiday, always looking for the opportunity to hitch a ride on the train of love. Hate inhabits the same house as love within us. May we never try to flee our conscience so that we will always do correct actions. May we learn to walk a mile in our brother's shoes so that we can see the humanity in each other. May we respect the differences in each other and know that our Creator has no choice of few. May we find comfort in the knowledge that each of us is slated for redemption and none is excluded. May we find solace in the knowledge that it is not a question of if, but one of when. Each of us shall return to our Father. May we know that we are just tenants on this earth and take care of each other, of ourselves, and of the earth and all the creatures that dwell thereon. May we always adhere to the divine principles of the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man, doing unto others as we would have them do unto us, love. May we know that which I do unto my brother, I do unto myself, for I am my brother's keeper. May the tiny shrouds of light forever illuminate the dark, and may peace forever reside within us and between us, one divine, universal love. Thank you once again for visiting my channel.